Hello, and welcome to another short Fox from Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zeckthar, and this week we'll be talking about the end of the founding of the Empire, which is called the Great Scouring. This week we'll be diving into one of the disasters of the Great Scouring, called the Iron Cage. Taking place after the birth of the Second Founding, it will go down as one of the greatest defeats that the Imperial Fists ever had, and cemented the Iron Warriors as their most hated foe. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy.
Yet, this rivalry started before even the Horus Heresy. It started with the brother Primarchs, Perterabo and Rogal Dorn. Now, nobody really knows what started the rivalry between the two Primarchs. One might say pride had a good measure in it, as well as similarities between the two. The two were so close in how they did things that what ended up happening in the end was one was glorified and the other was subtly put aside. This is where I think the problem truly started. The two were both stoic, stubborn, and spoke only when necessary, allowing themselves more time to brood. Their ideals in combat were almost the same, who prized indomitability and endurance. There was much that would suggest that they should see the world with one set of eyes, that perhaps they should be closer than any other of the Primarchs. Yet there were some slight differences in their thinking that I think favored Dorn in the eyes of his brothers, which all came down to war. Now, that there were some differences between the two cannot be denied, and often these differences may have been the cause of disputes, even if they were not underlying causes. While both Rogal Dorn and Perterabo often favored siegecraft in war, they often differed in their execution. While both were pragmatic, Perterabo often displayed a brutal directness in waging war, applying overwhelming forces or sustaining horrific casualties, while Dorn, on the other hand, would never balk at paying such a price for victory, but he rarely accepted large numbers of casualties, except through necessity. Dorn was undoubtedly an idealist above all else. Perterabo, a pragmatist, first and foremost. Another minor difference was a slight difference in tactical strengths. Perterabo was an excellent builder of fortresses, but his true forte was in siege warfare. Dorn, on the other hand, excelled in siege warfare, but there was no better builder of a castle than Dorn. Horus even jokingly remarked that where he could storm a fortress like no other, Rogal Dorn could hold it. He even said, "If I ever laid assault on a bastion possessed by you, then the war would last for an eternity. The best in attack matched by the best in defense. Ha ha ha." Such statements did not go unnoticed by the Iron Warriors Primarch. Perterabo began to feel like he was truly the second fiddle to the Praetorian of Terra, which enraged the man. Yet, the straw that broke the camel's back was when Rogal Dorn was honored by the Emperor in a way that Perterabo never could be. You see, after the Ullanor campaign, and Horus was named War Master, the Emperor returned to Terra to build a capital from which he could run his new empire. He took the Imperial Fist with him, set them up as his Praetorians, and charged Dorn with the construction of the Imperial Palace, something that did not go unnoticed by the other Primarchs. The Primarch Fulgrim once asked if Rogal Dorn thought the Imperial Palace could withstand an assault even by the Iron Warriors Legion. Dorn didn't hesitate and answered yes, it could. Perterabo flew into a rage upon hearing that Dorn thought the Imperial Palace would be proof against an assault by even as mighty siege masters as the Iron Warriors, and he unleashed a torrent of cruel and bitter accusations against his brother Primarch so unfounded that the onlookers from his own legion were dumbstruck. Now what Perterabo said, I was not able to find, but I'm sure it had something to do with his mother and why they're called the Imperial Fists. Something along those lines. Anyways, regardless, after this outburst was reported to Dorn, the two Primarchs rarely spoke, neither legion serving the same campaign ever again. The Imperial Fists were ever at the Emperor's side, and the Iron Warriors were part of Horus's vanguard. Throughout the Horus Heresy, these two Primarchs' legions clashed time and time again, neither truly getting an advantage over each other. Their true fate seemed to come to fruition when the Iron Warriors arrived on Terra and began to bombard the palace defenses. Perterabo took a perverse pleasure in tearing down the defenses set up by Rogal Dorn and his hatred for the Imperial Fist. Yet who was the better we'll never know. At least not here on Terra. It cannot be known whether Dorn's masterful constructed defenses would have proved the undoing of the Iron Warriors, for Horus was slain by the Emperor before the matter could be fully determined. Now that you have a little bit more understanding of Dorn and Perturabo, we'll move a little bit forward in history to the Great Scouring. During the Great Scouring, Rogal Dorn led his legion against the remaining traitor legions to drive them back into the Eye of Terror, though he concentrated his forces on driving the Iron Warriors from the Imperium worlds they had conquered during the Great Crusade and the Heresy. Perterabo was determined to retaliate against Dorn and the Imperial Fist for their success in driving the Iron Warriors from the conquest, as well as final demonstration of the superiority of the Iron Warriors in siege warfare. Perterabo believed that the defeat of Horus had robbed him of the pleasure of overwhelming Dorn's defenses of the Imperial Palace. To enact his vengeance, Perterabo constructed what he called the Eternal Fortress on the world of Sebastus IV, a defensive trap that was specifically designed to bog down a ground assault by the Imperial Fist and let the Iron Warriors inflict overwhelming casualties on their hated rivals. The fortress consisted over 20 miles of hardened bunkers, towers, minefields, trenches, razor wire, tank traps, redoubts, and a system of complex underground tunnels. The defenses of the fortress were shaped in the form of an 8-pointed star of chaos. At the end of the Eternal Fortress defenses lay a massive command bunker that was, however, intended to serve only as a decoy and had no actual tactical strategy value. Upon discovering that the Iron Warriors had taken refuge within the Eternal Fortress, Dorn declared that he and his legion would travel to Sebastus IV and bring Perterabo back to Terra in an iron cage, hence the name of the battle. The Primarch wanted to continue his crusade against the hated Iron Warriors, but more importantly, Dorn decided to bring an end to his resistance to the Primarch and Lord Commander of the Imperium, Roboute Guilliman's reformation of the Imperium, who had called in his Codex Astartes for all the Space Marine legions to be broken into a 1,000-man chapter to prevent the reoccurrence of another Horus heresy. Dorn had at first deeply opposed the changes of his beloved legion required by the Codex, but he now saw the wisdom of his brother Primarch's plans. Dorn decided that his Imperial Fist would abide by the Codex, but the entire Imperial Fist Legion would symbolically undergo a purging test of pain, like the pain of love, and the Legion used on its new recruits, and emerged ready and willing to reorganize into a new second founding chapters. The defeat of the Iron Warriors' Eternal Fortress would provide the perfect metaphorical pain glove for the entire Legion. As such, Dorn knew that his Legion might suffer heavy casualties, but even he did not expect what ended up happening during the battle that the Imperial Fist would remember only as the Iron Cage. Even against the advice of his brother Roboute Guilliman that no single legion could effectively combat against the defenses of the Iron Warriors and what they had erected on Sebastus IV, Dorn launched the campaign with only his own legion. Even worse, the assault was launched without the extensive planning and preparations that was usually so characteristic to the Imperial Fist. Now, before we really get rolling on this battle, I must point out that while most consider Perterabo arrogant, and one of the reasons why he turned traitor was because he wasn't as honored as his brother Rogal Dorn. This is true, but what transpires here on Sebastus makes me wonder if there is some truth in his anger. Like I mentioned before, the two brothers were very similar and both were very arrogant. Now, some might think Dorn less hampered by his pride. What is about to happen, I think, proves otherwise, which kind of makes me wonder. Now let me, if I may, lay a hypothetical out here. What if Perterabo had been honored instead of Dorn, and his legions became known as the Praetorians of Terra, and built the fortifications of the Emperor's palace? One wonders what Dorn might have done. One might even think that Dorn would have followed in the same footsteps as Perterabo did in the actual Horus Heresy. Personally, I think Rogal Dorn was far too loyal to the Emperor, but who knows? Perhaps pride would have bested him, like it did Perterabo. Well, this is just some food for thought. But anyways, I digress. The attack began with an orbital bombardment of Sebestus IV by the Imperial Fist's Legion fleet. However, the Iron Warriors had easily anticipated the tactic and took cover in the internal fortress's extensive underground systems of bunkers and remained unaffected by the ferocity of the bombardment. The traitor Marines then activated remote planetary defense missile silos, a sizable distance away from the fortress, forcing the Imperial Fist to commit their ground forces against them in a precipitous combat drop and ground assault if they did not want to see their fleet chewed up by the world's ground emplacements. As the Loyalist Astartes approached the planet's surface, the Iron Warriors detonated the missile silos in a massive thermonuclear explosion, which sent large amounts of radioactive debris into the atmosphere and produced an ionized effect that disrupted Vox communications between Imperial Fist ground forces and the Legion's orbiting fleet. This tactic eliminated any chance of effective air support from the Imperial Fist ground assault, a key advantage for the defenders. The destruction of Sebestus IV missile silos also served as a signal for the hidden Iron Warriors Legion fleet to attack their loyalist counterparts in orbit. While the two fleets were evenly matched, the Iron Warriors starships possessed large complements of Chaos Space Marines. These heretic Astartes were prepared to engage in ship-to-ship boarding operations, while the Imperial Fist ships had dispatched almost all of their Astartes to the planet's surface to participate in the ground assault. Using their numerical advantage in orbit, the Iron Warriors managed to scatter the Imperial Fist's fleet, further preventing it from providing support to their ground forces below. Meanwhile, back on the ground, the Imperial Fist approached the Eternal Fortress's outer perimeter in a massive front of full 4 companies across. Overseeing the battlefield from his heavily fortified command tower, Perterabo directed the course of the Iron Warriors' defense. The Imperial Fists were immediately met by an unyielding and multi-layered nature of the Iron Warriors' defense. With the aid of the tank traps and minefields, the Iron Warriors neutralized the Imperial Fist's armor assets and pinned down the infantry units. The Imperial Fist, despite suffering very high casualties, eventually managed to break through the Eternal Fortress's outer perimeter, only to discover less resistance than expected by the fortress lines. Unknown to the Loyalist Astartes, Perterabo had withdrawn portions of his forces to entice the Imperial Fist into assaulting the defenders' position and taking additional casualties. This allowed the Iron Warriors to control the movements of the Imperial Fist, driving them into carefully planned traps and kill zones. Through the skillful uses of these tactics, the Iron Warriors were slowly able to break apart the tactical organization of the Imperial Fists, scattering them by squad and company across the Eternal Fortress's prepared defenses when they could not concentrate their force. By the 6th day of the battle, the Imperial Fist had been reduced to fighting a series of individual engagements that could not hope to penetrate the Iron Warriors' layered defenses. Stuck in the stalemate, the battle lasted another 3 weeks. The surviving Imperial Fist ammunition was almost completely expended, and they chose to fight in hand-to-hand combat in half-flooded trenches, using only their combat knives, refusing to submit while they dug into the mud and used the corpses of their fallen battle brothers for cover. Rogal Dorn was forced to intervene personally, on a number of times to turn back assaults that would have slaughtered the remaining fists. Legion's captains pleaded with their Primarch to organize a breakout and retreat from the Eternal Fortress's lines. But Dorn refused. Ever loyal, the Imperial Fists resigned themselves to fight and die beside their Primarch. After 3 solar weeks and 6 days, the Ultramarines finally intervened, despite the Imperial Fist's protest, driving the Iron Warriors off the world with a combined orbital and ground assault. Unable to defeat the 2 full legions that combined their forces, Perterabo concentrated on denying the Imperial Fist's ability to withdraw intact and preventing them from collecting their dead and wounded. Over 400 Loyalist Battle Brothers' bodies were never recovered from the Legion, and this failure still ranks as a terrible dishonor for the Imperial Fist and all their successor chapters. The Iron Warriors succeeded in their plan to inflict overwhelming casualties on their hated rivals, but failed to destroy the Imperial Fists entirely. The result of this failure have long been debated by Imperial historians. One school argues that while Perterabo could have destroyed the Imperial Fists at any moment once they were arrogant enough to fall into his trap, he did not do so because he actually relished Rogal Dorn's anguish at living with the knowledge that the Iron Warriors had bested their rivals. Another argument claims that the Iron Warriors simply lacked the determination to make the sacrifices necessary to completely eliminate the Imperial Fist. Me personally, I think it was the first thought, especially knowing the hatred Perturabo had for Dorn. However, what remained of the Iron Fist proved to be a hardened veteran force, willing and able to comply with the demands of the Codex Astartes, just as Dorn had intended. Following the outcome of the Battle of the Iron Cage, the Imperial Fist Legion was then split into 3 successor chapters, including the Imperial Fists, the Crimson Fists, and the Black Templars. All 3 legions would remember the Iron Cage as an extraordinary test of their courage and fortitude as Astartes. Meanwhile, the Iron Warriors escaped into the Eye Terror following the Battle of the Iron Cage, and in exchange for forfeiting the captured Loyalist Astartes gene seed to the foul purposes of the Chaos Gods, Perterabo was allowed to ascend to become a Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided. Guilliman would continue to lead the Imperium until he met up and lost to Fulgrim, which I chronicled in
The Fall of the Avenging Sun.
Feel free to check it out. Dorn, on the other hand, would retire into seclusion, letting his successor chapters take to the field in his stead. For 2 solar decades, the Imperial Fist reorganized under the direction of Dorn. The chapter absorbed the tenets of the Codex Astartes, and by the time they reappeared on the battlefields of the Imperium, their adherence to the Codex was second only to the Ultramarines themselves. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this short box about Rogal Dorn and the Iron Cage. Next week, we will take a look at what some of the other legions were doing during the Great Scouring. If you enjoyed this box, please like, comment, subscribe, and follow. And like always,
Until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.